Welcome to another episode of Heroes of the Heart. My hero of the heart today is Joie Seldon. Joy is a master emotion educator. She's a dynamic speaker and is the author of Emotions and Owner's Manual. She's a creator of Emotions at Work online course, and she's coached and educated thousands of people around the world, debunking myths that hold us back and providing easy to apply emotion management tools. She also holds an MA, a master's degree in Somatic Psychology. Welcome to Heroes of the Heart, Joy. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what got you started in Emotions at Work, or this whole Emotions Manual, Owner's Manual idea.
Yes, it was initially, it was my own deep unhappiness. Back in, I was had ambitions to be a movie star. I had moved to LA and I was pursuing a career as an actor. I was getting some work and having certain positive experiences, but as a whole, I felt quite lost. I had a lot of ambition and not a clue as to how to really fulfill that. And one day I was standing in my little bedroom in this little house I lived in, and I just felt like hopeless. I don't know what to do. I was like standing there going, I don't know what to do. And I hear this voice in the back of my head say, God does not mean for you to be miserable. And I was like, well, yeah, that sounds exactly right. But why am I? Why am I miserable? Why is my family miserable? And why am I here? Why are we alive? And that moment was like a huge pivot for me. And while I still continue to be an actor and pursue acting, the bigger picture was to really understand what life was about, what the truth was, and how it is that I could become happier and have a better life. So that was the pivotal moment, and that sent me on a journey that included a lot of feeling.
I can relate to that. One of the things that was a pivotal time for me was a voice that's in the back of my head, or wherever it was, honestly, that stopped me from going a course of action that honestly would have short-circuited my life. That that sometimes we get those messages, those voices that call us in a different direction. And Joseph Campbell talks about the call to adventure, which is kind of an exciting thing, but it's also a little bit of a scary thing, right?
It is. It's daunting because you don't know what's out there. And even now, so much of what the work I do with clients, one of the key fears is the fear of the unknown. And so I didn't know, but I know you're all about the heart, and I relate. When I think about coming from my heart, I think about really being tapped into my intuition. So I really just followed my intuition, and books would appear. I'd walk in a bookstore and there's suddenly this book would, I actually literally had one fall off the shelf once. And so I started with reading books and then went into therapy. And one of the main things that I discovered in my journey about being willing to feel the discomfort, feel the fear and the uncertainty, is that it led me to answers. It led me to information and transformation. And so by actually facing that daunting, I always say my greatest talent is that I was willing. I was willing to be uncomfortable. And that discomfort actually led to a lot of great things.
That's a great skill or great talent to have, because when we enter what I like to call the creative wilderness, where there's lots of opportunity, but you don't really know which direction to go, that I have found, at least, that being willing to play the game, to test out the environment, the landscape, is key. Until we know which way to go, we have to be open to trying different directions and different paths.
Yes. Yes, yeah, we have to be open, and people get so fixed in their beliefs and their attitudes about things and the conditioning, what we've been taught and told by society or family, what have you. And so I never felt really that connected in my family. I never felt like I really belonged there. So I guess in a way, it became an advantage, though it took a lot of years, a lot of work to kind of undo that early conditioning. But it certainly made it open. And then what I found is that the emotions are actually a guide. Our emotions are a guidance system that speaks to us through our body sensations. And so the more I listened to my emotions, the clearer my path became. And that's over a long time. And that's what I like to teach and convey to people, is to give them all of the stuff that I spent 40 years learning and developing, but to give them some shortcuts so they can get there quicker.
Sure. That's excellent. And tell us a little bit about that journey. How, I know for myself that it took some effort and a big knock by the universe in the form of a proverbial 2x4 for me to wake up enough to realize that I needed to start paying attention to my emotions rather than just continuing to shove them to the back.
Yeah.
One, in your experience, are most people at least somewhat attuned to their emotions, or does it take some
people
effort?
are more, they are, the interesting thing to me is to realize that people are attuned to their emotions, but there's so much judgment about emotions themselves. There's so many myths and misunderstandings and labeling of certain emotions, quite a few, as negative. And joy is positive, excitement is positive, but fear and anger and shame, and sometimes even sadness, these are like negative emotions. And so we resist them, or we judge the emotions themselves. And then there's that tension that's created because we're not allowing the emotional flow, and then people doubt themselves. They're not sure. They think, oh, there's something wrong with me, or I don't know if I can trust this. When the truth is, they're getting the message. They just don't know how to listen to it.
That's a really interesting point. So they are attuned to it, or the radio station, so to speak, is dialed in. They're getting the message, but they don't really know how to respond appropriately to it.
Right. Or they may label it as I'm stressed. What is stress? We know there's a physical tension to stress, or an activation of the nervous system. But is there sadness in there? Is there anger in there? Is there fear in there? And so part of this is like translating those general terms that we tend to use to something more specific, and being able to name, oh yeah, I'm angry and I'm fearful all at the same time.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I recently read the idea that in a survey of hundreds of people, most people could only list a handful of emotions. They could probably come up with, but when they identified within themselves, it was only a handful of emotions. I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm, whatever.
Yes. In my system that I developed over time, there are 7 primary emotions. And one of the distinctions I make is that primary emotions are those core, fundamental emotions that we're in essence kind of hardwired for: sadness, shame, fear, disgust, anger, passion, and joy. Those are the 7 in my system. But out of that are a myriad of feelings, and feelings are one or more primary emotions plus our thinking. All emotion is related to our thinking, but it's that very subjective, complex, how we are as human beings. We're very complex. I like to say that emotions are actually quite straightforward. It's people who are complicated.
Another good distinction there. So tell me a little bit more what you mean. You made the distinction, and I've not heard this before, but I think it's really good to emphasize, is that we have emotions and we have feelings.
Yes.
And that they're not synonyms for one another?
It can be subtle, the distinction, but for instance, say someone is jealous. Well, jealous is not a core emotion, but jealousy is comprised of a belief and attitude about something, you're thinking about something. And usually when we're jealous, there's an element of fear because somebody has something that we don't have. Or if it has to do with a relationship and they're jealous of the boyfriend or the girlfriend or whatever, then there's this fear of loss, potential loss, and maybe some anger that's a mixture of that thing called jealousy. So what might be your experience of jealousy might be different than mine. But when we come to the core emotion of fear, then we can have fear, that primary sensation of fear, and fear is one of our protector emotions. Its basic message, if your life, let's say fight or flight, most people have heard of fight or flight, that instinct that's there to save you. But in our everyday interactions with people, we may have a fear response, but its primary message is pay attention. Something's happening, you're activated, pay attention. Is it outside yourself or inside yourself? And this is where slowing everything down. And so people are in touch with their emotions, but they don't take the time to really be still for a moment and really listen to what is this emotion directing my attention to in the specifics of fear, for example.
Okay. So the way I'm framing that in my own mind is that the emotions are kind of the stimuli, if you will, to kind of get our attention. And then the feelings are, well, what is that stimuli telling me?
Yes. Or what am I telling myself?
Right. Yeah. What's my interpretation of that?
But they are bringing information. And that's why I distinguish in the owner's manual of, and in all my teaching around, so we know there's a difference between sadness and anger because we feel very differently in our body. So the emotion is an activation of the biological parts of our system, our autonomic nervous system, that comes from the brain through the brain stem down through the vagus nerve. There's a lot of science involved with the activation of emotions in the body. And so part of this is to help people to understand that there's nothing wrong with them when they experience this. And if they can stay present with the sensation, each emotion is bringing a signature piece of information. So that sadness is about loss and anger is about setting boundaries. And so that you can recognize, oh, when I'm feeling, this heat, or I'm feeling my chest tight, or my hands want to go into fists, then that's anger coming up, and I'm feeling because I want to set a boundary. So that's where we're connecting what you're thinking with what this body sensations are.
Okay.
That's where you have the mastery in terms of your experience of your emotions.
Tell me what you mean by a signature with regards to emotions.
Well, there's a core, it gets very more complex because as I said, we're complex as people. But so let's take anger, for example, which is a big emotion that causes a lot of problems. So we would say emotion causes anger causes a lot of problems. But if you understand that when the anger comes up, there is something in you that's saying no to something that's happening. That's the basic message. No, it's a boundary setter. I don't like this. I don't want this. And it might be something coming from the outside, or it might be something that you're projecting from what's inside of you in your own thinking, beliefs.
Okay.
That's the signature information of anger. Whereas sadness is about loss. It slows your nervous system down. So anger is like activated and your focus is outside of yourself. But with loss, we tend to turn inward. Everything slows down. And whether you get teary-eyed or not, that's not the point. It's just that your energy comes inward in order for you to process the loss, whether it's tangible or intangible.
That's really interesting. One of the things that I had to learn how to do with, and I have struggled with, as my audience knows, a lifetime of dealing with severe depression. And when I finally started to gain some skill with it, it was, first of all, just kind of accepting it rather than fighting against it. And secondly, kind of looking, I guess what I was doing as I was feeling the emotion, and at least the way that I'm interpreting it, I was feeling the emotion and then I was trying to understand what I was feeling. Like what was the message? What was like behind the emotion?
Right.
And by coming at it from a place of curiosity rather than a place of resistance or frustration or judgment or whatever, then I was able to unpack it and move through it rather than being overcome by it.
That's beautiful. That's really powerful. And you said several magic words: being curious, having an attitude of curiosity. What is this thing that's happening to me? And not judging it, accepting it. All of that allowed you to move through it. And that's the thing, emotions come and go. We for whatever reasons, and depression has many different layers to it. And there's, it can be very complex, but we can also experience temporary depression, letdowns, disappointment can be a kind of a depression. So yeah, that's just wonderful what you did. I admire that greatly.
Well, thank you. I sometimes tell people that I didn't really have a choice, but I guess I did have a choice. But
yeah, you do. And we always have a choice. And in fact, that's one of my passions around the educational aspect of emotions, is I want people to recognize that they have choice. And that's what changed my life, is when I realized I wasn't a victim of my circumstances, that I had choice. And the more I paid attention, for me, the more I paid attention to my emotions, to my feelings, the more clarity I got around what was my experience, and completely have transformed who I was when I was younger to, not so much who I was, but how I experienced life.
Yes. Yeah. I can very much relate to that. I mean, walking under a proverbial cloud all the time, as opposed to, figuring out, well, one, cloudy days can be really awesome because you can get some great shadows and, lighting, and there can be some really positive things to those cloudy days. And secondly, realizing, that not every day is cloudy,
right.
And I spent much of my life in the Northwest, where it is oftentimes rainy and so forth.
Yeah.
Which was both a challenge and a blessing, because it helped me to learn how to deal with my own internal emotional weather.
Oh, I love that phrase, emotional weather. That's what goes on. We have emotional weather.
It's sunny, it's cloudy, it's thundering, it's whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, I'm really intrigued by this idea of an emotional owner's manual. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
That's what my husband actually came up with the title, because the title is always a big thing. And it's like, yeah, that's what it is. And it is my particular approach to emotions. Is I'm a learner. I love reading and studying and learning new things. I think it's part of what keeps me feeling young. And so as over time, when I had an epiphany, where I had finally made many changes in my life. And I was married at 44. I got married for the first time, finally had a relationship that was what I wanted. I had to learn how to have that. And I was making my living as an actor and acting teacher. And I was living in San Francisco in this beautiful area. And I was like, wow, life is great. And I'm just, I can rest on my laurels now. And I hear the same voice back in my head saying, now what? And I went and had a consultation with a spiritual counselor. And she said, well, what do you do better than anybody else in the world? And I just froze because I felt so intimidated. And out of my mouth came, I feel.
Mm.
And I said, oh my God, I think I'm supposed to teach people how to feel. And I felt this wave of energy come from my feet up out through the top of my head. And I went home and created this class called Accessing Your Emotions.
Mm.
And that was the start of it. And then over time, then I went to school. I ended up going and getting my master's in somatic counseling psychology so I could understand the psychology part. And that's about being in the body, and everything kind of came together. So the owner's manual is a compilation. It's a distillation of all the years of personal work I did, of some acting tools, spiritual tools. There is information about the 4 cornerstone emotions of sadness, fear, anger, and joy, how we can really embrace these as assets and utilize them to create a more fulfilling life. So there's exercises and guided visualizations, and it's kind of like a workbook that you can go back. I know people who've had it for a few years, they'll go back and say, oh yeah, when I feel stuck or something, I'll go back to the book and I'll do one of the exercises.
Huh. Wow. That's great. So what I'm taking away from that is that rather than being at the mercy of our emotions and or either at the mercy of our emotions or reacting in an unhealthy way to our emotions, that we can actually use our emotions to navigate to a better place.
Exactly. Including our relationship with ourselves. So I define emotions as a biological or body-based information system, the purpose of which is to prompt you to action that is optimally beneficial for your survival and your well-being. So
can you tell me a little bit about how that works? And I'm wondering, when you say that, use the word action, I'm wondering if acting, the craft of acting, plays into that.
It did. I say acting saved my life because it taught me about humanity. The actions may be literal, physical, or they might be internal. I need to change a thought, change a belief. But it's in acting, you have to understand, or at least the way I was taught and learned, is that you understand, the character better than the character knows themselves. So you have to understand the motivation. Where are they coming from? What do they want? What are they after? And then when the obstacles come up, what is it triggering in them when the obstacles come up in drama? And so learning to act was a lesson in humanity for me. And it was an opportunity to express emotions in a place that felt safe. So on the stage or in front of a camera, this had a purpose. And so having that sense of flow of the emotion actually helped me to express myself more. And then I was able to translate that into how I help other people express themselves. That's one of the big things that people are challenged by is I have, with my family or with a coworker or my boss, like I have these things, I have these feelings, I have this something I want to communicate, and they get stuck because they don't know how to do it. They don't want to hurt the other person's feelings, or they don't want to make waves or get in trouble or get fired or, damage the relationship in any way. And so they don't say anything. And then other stuff happens. Resentment builds up, all kinds of unnecessary pain and suffering occurs.
I recently heard something in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, that, our experiences and our expression they don't happen in the same part of our brain. And so they don't come, like, if anybody's ever had the experience, and I'm sure almost everybody has, where you have an experience and you don't realize how to actually respond verbally to that experience until, you 10 minutes later or something.
Right. And then there's a rumination of going over and over in your head. So and I actually, this is one of I have the book, but I haven't started it yet because I tend to have too many books at one time, but I'm fascinated by that. And it ties in with the acting, because in acting is like that. What is your intention? People have intentions all the time, but we're not conscious of what we are setting as our intention. And so then we come against an obstacle. We come against somebody not recognizing, not reading our mind or not understanding us, or we haven't articulated it clearly enough. So we have the obstacles, but then that intention is not being fulfilled. And then tension happens in the body. And so all these different things happen, illnesses, or it can be depression. It can be, I'm a cancer survivor. And one of the things that I did in the process of healing was to go on retreat and invite all of the anger that I had not been in touch with. And I discovered some anger at certain people in my life that shocked me. I had no idea. I was carrying all that anger. And so part of the thing in the book is I provide tools, techniques, and exercises to release in a safe way emotions that we've been holding in the unconscious mind or in the subconscious in our bodies for a long time.
Wow. So is there a practice or and I love daily routines and that kind of thing. Is there a practice or a way for people to discover or unpack those types of things so that they don't, end up with cancer or
yeah, right. Exactly. The simplest practice is to take time, and you can set the timer for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be long, and sit with yourself quietly. You can close your eyes and just say, what am I feeling right now? And it can be hard if you're not used to naming your feelings. You can start with body sensations. Oh, I feel numb in my body, or I feel my heart is pounding, or my shoulder is tight, or my stomach is upset, or my neck is tight, or I'm feeling kind of blank, or I feel like my head is buzzing. Anything that you do that turns your attention to say, what's going on in your body is going to lead you to understanding what specific emotions you're feeling. And in the book, I go through these 4, and in my class, I go through 7. You can actually just, write down sadness, fear, anger, joy, and then look at that and let me see, what does this feel like? Is it closer to sadness? Is it closer to anger? And start to tune your body to wake it up, but to even just spending 5 minutes a day where you invite what's the truth about what you're feeling, and then accept it, even if it feels uncomfortable, and don't worry about where it comes from. You don't have to go back into early childhood. I mean, sometimes that's very beneficial, but sometimes you need somebody to be with you to do that.
Sure.
But it's really about being in the present time. So that's the quickest and easiest way to begin.
That's a great point. And honestly, you're reminding me that at one time that was part of my daily meditation practice, and I got out of that practice of doing that. I still have a daily meditation practice. It's just that's not part of it. So
yeah,
I will start integrating that more, because I think it's really valuable.
In the book and in the course there's the emotional fluidity exercise, where you literally practice acting as if I'm sad and I'm scared and now I'm angry and now I'm joyful, and you just kind of act it out, and it sort of gives your body a message, hey, it's okay to feel these things.
That's a great point too. And again, one of my practices that I haven't done for a while is I used to do mirror work, where I'd, okay, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm whatever, and just kind of going through those emotions, just so that I just like you said, getting comfortable with giving expression to those feelings and being okay. And it did two things. One, being able to give expression to those emotions, like when I'm speaking or something, but also so that when I am feeling that way, I can more readily identify and say, I'm feeling, happy, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling whatever. And
yes, that's brilliant. You have a innate emotional intelligence operating very well in you, it sounds like.
I do now. For a long time, it was kind of like set aside, and the door was locked. And
oh yeah, I understand. I was a hardcore perfectionist. That was my adaptation.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Same here. So that brings me to a question we talked a little bit about in the beginning, in that before we started recording, I went this past weekend to the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta. And one of the things that I was really struck by there was just the power of Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision in the face of so much opposition. I'm sure, and I don't know, maybe there's some material out there that talks about his emotional feelings and so forth around that. But for me, it's more of the imagery and, the recordings and so forth. I imagine that he went through some pretty harrowing emotional experiences, and yet he was able to maintain his vision to the degree that, going on 60 years later, it's still, that vision is still alive.
Right. Powerful, huh? That ties in with intention of the character enacting, the vision. And for me, it was just that moment where it was like, I don't have to be miserable. I can have the life I want. But what is that? Let me get really clear. And for me, happiness was never my goal, really. Fulfillment. I wanted to be fulfilled. I wanted to be all that I could be in the world. And so, and I had, I wanted to know the world. I wanted to understand it. My mother once said something to me when I was a teenager, and her trying to suppress me, which was, she thought I was becoming too worldly. And it was like, I want to be worldly. I want to be worldly. This is one of my goals, is to be worldly. I want to know the world. And so that, for me, I want to understand life and be engaged in life, was my personal vision. It didn't really have to do with helping humanity, though now the work that I do is really motivated by helping other people eliminate the pain and suffering. There is so much unnecessary pain and suffering that goes on. And unfortunately, the mismanagement of emotions is what creates this conflict. Well, it's the beliefs and the thinking is what really creates it. But the thing that we share is our emotional experience. With you're really angry and I'm angry, then we have a shared experience. How can we, I'm still working on this, how can we come together to use our emotions as a way to connect to each other? When I, in my journey of learning, my name, Joy, became my teacher because I was not joyful when I was younger. So I even changed the spelling from Joy to Joye in my
really
French.
Interesting.
Try to distance myself. But what I learned is that the more I felt the full range of my emotions without judgment, the more joy I experienced. And now I define joy as the emotion of connection.
Wow. That's beautiful.
So we can connect to ourselves, we can connect to our other emotions, we can connect to each other, to nature. I mean, there's many, many different ways to experience connection.
So it's not necessarily interpersonal connection,
not
although
necessarily.
It doesn't sound like it excludes that.
Although we need that. No, that's where we have the hardest. That's where the things are the hardest. But I think it also starts with yourself, because there's a lot of self-judgment that goes on with people.
That's really interesting. I had an experience again with my daughter this weekend where she made the observation that I tend to react to things. And I really value
reactive.
Yes, yeah. And I really value being able to control or yeah, I guess where I was with it was that I want to control it. I want to be, more zen all the time. And what as I was pondering that and kind of engaging that conversation with my daughter, what I realized is that rather than being in opposition to those reactions, and saying, well, it's bad for me to react or to be angry or to whatever, saying, well, you know what, maybe there are more appropriate ways to respond or to express that anger than others. But isn't it actually kind of great that I am reactive to the different things, that I
Yes.
do have emotions?
Yes, exactly. Yes, yes. And bravo to you to have a relationship with your daughter where she could say that to you and you can hear that and then think about it. That alone to me is the key to how we can uh, grow, because we need each other. We need feedback. We all need
Yes.
feedback. I'll learn that in my marriage.
Yes.
Oh, yes, dear, you're right.
One of the great things about marriage.
But yes, it's you. First of all, you cannot control emotions.
Mm.
They happen before we can consciously think most of the time. So we can't stop ourselves from feeling something, but we can be in dominion of our experience, not in control. And there's a very clear distinction in my mind. Control is more like manipulation, whereas dominion is choice. Yes, I have a strong reaction. There's a wonderful book called Mastering Your Moods, Knowing Your Emotional Style and Making Them Work for You.
Nice.
And there's a copy on eBay. It's out of print. Somebody go get it. Because it helped me so much. I'm a what's the word? It's a therapist who saw the patterns in people's temperament. And I'm a reactor. I am very quick to get angry. I get angry just probably about every day, but it doesn't last long. I don't dwell in that land, but I react very quickly and respond to things. And you don't need to stop that, but you do need to be in dominion of it so that you can make a choice. Is this righteous? What am I going to do about it?
Thank you for that distinction. That's really powerful. Now, one of the questions that I have that's coming to mind for me is just, how does managing, maybe that's not the right word, but how does using our emotional owner's manual help us to create greater abundance for ourselves and for others?
That is like, I can feel my body relaxing just hearing that question, because first of all, abundance of what? Abundance of what? I mean, when I was younger, my perspective was very narrow. And so my experience in that whole thing of wanting to be worldly, my mother continuously trying to keep me contained, gave me no choices. And so as I have been able to broaden my perspective and not be afraid of experiences, so it opens doors, it opens our perspective on the world, I believe very, very firmly. And so that we have an abundance of creativity that is available to us when we have more emotional flow, when we understand our emotions and have that emotional mastery, if you will, that relationship with our own emotions that provides opportunity for us to see other options, other possibilities. And just recently, I'll share with you, I actually feel a little verklempt coming on of this moments where I just feel I am in a state of presence and flow like I never have been in my life. And in that, all things are possible in that moment. And yet I'm not striving. I'm not I'm not reaching for anything. I'm just open. And it took me a long time to get to this point, but I have abundance of joy in my life, of friendships, of relationships, of opportunities. So I think it opens lots and lots of different doors.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Because one of the things that I'm becoming more and more aware of is that we already live in an abundant world. We have access to abundance all the time, right?
Yes. Yeah, just look at nature. I'm lucky. I live in a place where there's lots of places to go and be in nature, and the redwoods and the ocean and lakes. And nature is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Life itself is abundant.
Yes. Yeah. Nature is it is definitely one of my top instructors. And one of the reasons I really enjoy going out and I've got 35 acres of forest behind my house. So it's nice to be able to get out there and commune with nature. Because wonderful. There's so much wisdom there.
So much wisdom. Yes. And it renews itself. People are saying, oh, I don't want to feel this feeling because I'm going to get stuck there. And, I'm in a sadness even, I'm going to get stuck there. I'm going to always, no, you're not. I promise, I swear.
Yeah. That it's actually that resistance, that the idea that what you resist is what persists.
Exactly. Yeah.
What you allow, you can let go of.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's allowing our emotions to flow rather than trying to control them.
Yes, exactly. I had a pre-ulcer stomach in elementary school. I had to get out of class.
Wow, in elementary school.
That's how tight I was, how holding in these emotions.
Yeah.
As I said, I had cancer. I had a melanoma tumor in my leg, which I didn't know melanoma could grow internally. I'm fair skinned. I've had moles removed and that kind of thing. But this was like, oh my God. And I did medical things that I needed to do, not everything they said, but I processed emotions around it. And that was a long time ago. That was over 25 years ago.
Wow.
And I'm very healthy. So it's good for your physical health as well.
Yes.
Very important. A very big part of mental and physical wellness is emotional fluidity.
Absolutely. I know when I started dealing more effectively with my emotions, I stopped having the migraines that I had and, the back pain that I'd have and, showed up in so many more ways than just the emotional domain.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the last questions I have for you today, Joy, is what is your heart calling you to do today?
My heart is calling me to there's a piece of work that I've been working on in terms of getting myself out and my message out in the world, because it used to be a lot about me being out in the world. And now it's not about me. It's about this work that I see changing people's lives. So my heart is calling me to work on some writing that I've been dealing with, and also to spend some time on a one-woman show that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, that I've started. I've taken a lot of notes and have ideas. And so I'm trying to let myself spend a little bit of time during my week where I let everything else about business go, and I just spent on that creative expression.
That's excellent. The last question I have for you is, how does our audience continue this conversation with you?
Well, you can always go to Amazon, and my book is in Kindle, Audible, and in print. So whatever version you like, that's a great start. But if you're someone who is struggling with a relationship, or struggling with your own self-doubt or self-esteem, or issues around your emotional life, I invite you to come and have a free conversation with me. You can go to joytotherescue.com. It's JOIE, like in joie de vivre, joy, JOIE, to the rescue.com. And you go straight to my calendar and you can schedule in a half-hour conversation with me. And I'll see what I can do to support you.
Excellent. Thank you, Joy. Thank you for being our hero of the heart today.
Oh, thank you. This was wonderful. I've so enjoyed this.
Likewise, it's been such a pleasure. And to our audience, until our stories meet again, be the bright light in someone's dark night.